I'm Ann Harlow. I'm the president of the Berkeley Historical Society, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to this evening's event. The Berkeley Historical Society and Museum has had a relationship with the Reid family and Betty Reid Soskin for several years now, since I guess since we had or even before our first African Americans in Berkeley exhibit, which featured the Reid family as one of four families. We, I believe, had a program with Betty Reid Soskin and Carol Kennerly at the South Berkeley Senior Center. Um, and then I think she spoke again at one of our openings. So we're delighted to help support this effort to create a movie about Betty Reid Soskin. And we appreciate the help of the Reid family in setting this up on a Zoom account that could accommodate up to 250 people. Um, and we got more than 250 people trying to attend. Brian Gibble is a graduate of the journalism program at UC Berkeley, specializing in film. And um, since we're already, I guess, running a little behind schedule, I will go ahead and turn it over to Brian.
Thank you so much, Anne. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's an honor to be able to share a clip of our film and also to be able to collaborate with the Berkeley Historical Society on this screening. And before I get started, I just want to give a few shout outs because I see some important and very appreciated faces in our Zoom attendance. So one person that I saw joined us, who I think you all will be excited to hear about, is a woman named Susan Sanford. Hello, Susan. Thank you for joining us. Susan is actually the woman that Betty wrote her song, Sign My Name to Freedom, which is the title of our film and her memoir about. So she's a very, very special and honored guest, and it's amazing to have her here. She went to Mississippi during Freedom Summer, and Betty was so inspired by her work with SNCC at that time to register voters during the Civil Rights Movement that she wrote her song, Sign My Name to Freedom, about Susan and to Susan. So thank you, Susan, for joining us. It's great to have you here. And also, I'd like to just say hello to Mike and Sari Kappas, who are longtime supporters of this documentary film and close friends of both Betty and myself. Mike is he was an incredible blues agent before he retired, representing some wonderful musicians, and is just a phenomenal human being. I also saw Lincoln Cushing on here, who's a great supporter of the film, formerly head of archives and history with Kaiser, which is obviously attached to Betty's story through the Homefront effort. And I saw Joni Cooper on here as well from the Docklands Film Festival, who helped support this film years ago when we pitched the project at Docklands. And then last but not least, also Gary Yost, who's a good friend and somebody that has done some incredible VR 360 immersive work with myself and Betty to help document the story. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce myself. As Anne said, my name is Brian Gibble, and I'm a director and cinematographer and a producer. And I've been working on this film about Betty since I met Betty's daughter, Diara, actually, in 2016, so for 8 years now. And I've developed a very close relationship that's been incredibly rewarding with Betty, with Diara, with Aliana, Betty's granddaughter, and the whole family, and have been really honored and privileged to be able to collaborate closely with the whole family and to, in the process of years, document a large portion over time of Betty's life and her story, and was honored and privileged to be introduced to Betty's music by Betty about 6 months after I met her, and was working on a film originally about Reid's Records, the record store that Betty and her now deceased husband Mel started in 1945, which was the first Black-owned record store in California. So there's so many twists and turns and little known aspects of Betty's life that go far beyond her work as a park ranger. And that, in part, those lesser known parts of Betty's life are what our documentary, Sign My Name to Freedom, focuses on. And so I'll give you guys a little bit of background about the film, just a little bit more. It looks at Betty's life and her somewhat secret life from about 50 years ago as a singer-songwriter, when she started first remembering songs and then realizing that she was actually writing songs during a very difficult and traumatic part of her life. And I don't want to tell you too much more about it because you'll see more about that in the 20-minute documentary film sample that we'll show here in just a moment. We're having this screening today because we are working and determined to get this film funded so we can get it to completion as soon as possible, because it's my dream and Betty's dream to be able to see the film completed while she's still with us. She's 102, she's doing well, but we all feel like the clock is ticking given her advanced age. And we've come a long way in the film over the 8 years that we've been making it. We've finished and completed principal photography for the documentary, which means we've finished all of the shooting, or the vast majority of the shooting of the documentary content. We're still hoping to shoot some dramatic recreations of parts of Betty's life that were never documented with photographs or archival film, but that are really crucial key parts to her story and turning points in her life. And most importantly, we're working to raise money to be able to complete editing of the documentary. With all the footage that we shot, editing a documentary is a long road and a complex process. Most feature-length documentaries take about 9 months and sometimes longer to complete the editing on, because there's just so many iterations that need to be done to make the story coherent and cohesive and polished and as strong as possible. And we have an Emmy award-winning editor named Kevin Jones that we are really lucky to have brought onto this film. He's edited literally dozens of feature-length documentaries, won all kinds of awards. He lives in Richmond, and his office is just a few blocks from the Rosie the Riveter Park. And he's the perfect person to edit this film, but he's also very in demand because he's so talented and so experienced. And so a large portion of the funds that we're trying to raise through our crowdfunding campaign, which we just launched, are going to keep Kevin on for 9 months to edit this film. And if we can raise the funds we need in a timely manner, we'll be able to get the film finished by the end of this year, which is our goal. So we launched a crowdfunding campaign yesterday, actually, and we're seeking to raise $60,000 to be able to bring Kevin and his assistant onto the project for several months, and also to be able to do some other important steps, like remastering some of Betty's old songs from tapes that aged with time, and the songs are preserved, but they are staticky or they're distorted in certain places, and a remaster would be fantastic so that we can release an album of her unreleased songs when we release the film. I'll give you guys more information about the crowdfunding campaign after we watch the sample. But before we do that, I want to introduce you to a really important team member on this documentary project, which is Betty's granddaughter, Aliana Reid, who is an associate producer and has been helping, and a social media manager for the project. She's been helping out probably for almost a year now and has become a really crucial member of the team. So I will let Aliana say hello to all of you, and then we'll start the sample. I think you're muted, Aliana.
Of course, sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Aliana Reid. I am Betty's granddaughter, and this is actually the first time that I've been professionally working on a film, which is a really big deal for me because I had studied film from the age of 14, 15 years old, went to college for it, and it took a while for me to actually get a professional gig like this, and it means so much to me to be working on such a project that is so close to my heart. Before this, I was working for a post-production company, just doing some QC quality control on some files, doing COVID testing on set on movie and TV show sets, just to be close to film. And before that, I was working at a movie theater. So this was an amazing opportunity that was presented to me about a year ago. I started working as the post-production assistant, and in my year working with Brian, I am very happy and honored to have moved up to the role of associate producer. I'm very excited about this project and really excited to share this 20-minute work sample, just because I feel like it perfectly illustrates why this specific project is so important in sharing my grandmother's story. I've told Brian this many times before. I grew up seeing my grandma in media, but this is the first time that I've seen such a intimate and emotional side of my grandmother and her story. So I'm excited to share this with all of you. So with that being said, I will go ahead and start the screening.
I've lived many lives. I've been many women over time. Part of my identity is still mother. Another part of my life, I was that black merchant down on Sacramento Street. I was a political activist. And that was all before I became a park ranger at the age of 85.
My grandma Betty Reid Soskin just turned 102. She's a rare living link to the history of Black folks from the Jim Crow era of the Bay Area. This project reveals a deeply personal side of my grandma's life I never knew about. And she shares her untold story in our documentary, Sign My Name to Freedom.
I packed Secret Betty up in boxes and reel-to-reel tapes. No one in my life knew that I had been a singer or that I had written music.
The song I wrote most recently after watching the television coverage of the raids on the Panther headquarters in Chicago and in Los Angeles. Little boy black, city streets calling my little boy back.
The tapes you see behind me contain Betty's home movies and her unreleased recordings from the 1960s and 1970s when she was a singer-songwriter. They're 50 years old and they're degrading over time, but they contain dozens of original songs that are autobiographical glimpses into Betty's inner world. They're the heart of our documentary and they need to be heard. We launched this crowdfunding campaign to give us the best chance to complete the film while Betty's still with us. If we raise $60,000, we can hire our award-winning editor and his assistant for 2 months, shoot our first dramatic recreation, and begin audio restoration to release an album of Betty's music to the public. If we can raise $100,000, we can complete 5 months of editing. And if we can raise $150,000, we can complete editing for the full documentary film.
A simple sign of love. That was something I wrote for the church.
We span the miles, we wear the smiles born of sharing this day.
Writing songs was Betty's coping mechanism. They captured the wide spectrum of emotion she felt as a young Black woman and mother during the height of the civil rights movement. Now, with your support, we can bring my grandma's untold story to life.
I feel like I want to be whole, and I want my artist self to join with my activist self because they're all the same person. And maybe I need to do that before I die.
I'd like to see the film because I think it may be important. I want to see it happen during my lifetime. With your help, I think we can make this happen.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, I hope all you guys enjoyed that. It makes me, I'm like honestly bawling over here. It still gets me every time. But yeah, it was an amazing experience to get to work on and help create that, and to be along with Betty on this journey that has been really transformative for me. And I know for Aliana and for the whole film crew, it's been something that is, something that really is near and dear to our heart and really important to us. So thank you all for watching. I hope you guys were inspired by the clip. I think it's going to be, in fact, I know it's going to be a beautiful and really important and special film. And we have actually Betty here, who has joined us from her home. Betty, do you want to say anything to the folks here? Aliana, if you can go ahead and unmute her. We can find her because there's a lot of folks on this call, but that would be wonderful to have Betty be able to say. Hi, Betty.
Hi, how are you?
You're doing so well. It's nice to see you.
So nice to see everyone. I just can't imagine having such a wonderful thing happen to me.
Mm. Mm.
I don't know.
Mm.
Maybe I'm speechless.
I understand how you feel, Betty. Yeah. The moment that you start singing in that clip, because there's a lot of material that's not in this 20-minute clip. The film will be about 90 minutes, is our guess. And I just remember how nervous you were and how you kept insisting you could never sing again and you could never compete. And then when you do sing, it just makes me cry every time because it's so beautiful. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us. And there's so much more to share with everybody that we're really determined to share with the world. All of the songs, which is there's probably 15 to 20 songs that Betty wrote and composed during the 50s and 60s, growing out of the trauma that she experienced when she was in Walnut Creek. Every song is autobiographical, as she mentions in that clip, and they're all deeply personal, very intimate journeys through what Betty was living through and what the country was experiencing at that time. So part of what's not in this sample is Betty meeting with the kids that you saw, or you saw little bits of her meeting with them and with the orchestra arrangers, and she worked with a bunch of other musicians. And in the process of that, she was telling all of the people that were collaborating with her around her music the stories of where those songs came from. And so the film gives us the stories of those songs. It goes deeper into Betty's experiences and her family's experiences, confronting residential segregation in Walnut Creek. And it helps to share the history of what many Black and brown folks experienced in terms of residential segregation. And the legacy of that is still so present when we see deeply divided cities and urban landscapes in the Bay Area today. So for us, it's really important to get this film out. And also one of our main goals is to get it into schools as a teaching resource. And actually a woman named Shane Carter, who I believe is on this call now, has recently come on board the project as a curriculum consultant. And Shane does amazing work helping to get all kinds of different topics integrated into public school curriculums. And she's going to help us to do that around this film, to help teach the history of redlining and workplace segregation, which Betty experienced, I guess, during World War II, during the home front. I'm seeing a few questions stream in. Helen Marcus asks, when did Betty stop being a ranger? Betty stopped being a ranger at the age of 100, 2 years ago. So relatively recently. She served as a park ranger from the young age of 85 to 100 for 15 years. And that's also quite inspiring about Betty, because she started a new career, and in some ways, by far her biggest public persona emerged at 85 years old. So for all of us here that are not 85 yet, that gives us hope that maybe we can have a very rewarding second act as well. And if you do have more questions, please send them in either as direct messages to myself or to Aliana, and we'll field them and respond to them. I just want to briefly, before we do that, I want to show you guys quickly our Seed and Spark page. So we're here today to share the clip, but also to do our very best to raise funds so we can complete this documentary while Betty's still here to be a part of it, because it's a dream that both of her and I have. So I'm going to share my screen with you briefly and just show you our page. Aliana already sent a direct link, so you guys can link through to the Seed and Spark page if you'd like to make a donation. We'll also follow up by email with the same information, but just hang tight, and I'm just going to very briefly walk you through that page so you can see it. Let's see. Okay. Is that okay, so there we go. Is that my Seed and Spark page that I'm showing, or my email? Because I see my email coming up right now. Aliana, is it the Seed and Spark?
No, yeah, I have eyes on Seed and Spark, yes.
Okay, great. It brought up my email, which is full of all kinds of stuff to do. But anyways, I'm gonna scroll through this with you guys briefly so I can show you a little bit more about the Seed and Spark. Here it is. So here's our page. We just launched this yesterday, and we are aiming to raise a minimum of $60,000 for post-production. The URL is here, which I have highlighted. Again, we sent that in the chat, and we'll send it by email. On the right, there's a make a pledge. And the way that the crowdfunding campaign works is people pledge now to donate, but the donations don't actually get charged to the card or bank account used to pledge unless we hit our goal. So we have 58 days and 23 hours, as you see. And if we don't raise $60,000 in that time, then we don't raise anything, because we feel that's a minimum of what we need to be able to really advance the project in a meaningful way. On the page, there's incentives. So if you, for different donation tiers, you get different rewards, which you can either accept or you can waive. Some of them are exclusive access to clips of the film. So briefly, this young lady that I'm hovering my mouse over dancing, and there's a choir of students at Oakland School for the Arts there singing one of Betty's songs, Ebony the Night, which was Betty's, I guess, narration of her realization that Black is beautiful, which at the time in the 60s, that sounds like something we've probably heard now, but at the time it was not commonplace. And still, for many people, is not widely accepted. And the rendition that those kids did of Betty's song and the dance are spectacular. It's beautiful. When you saw Betty tearing up in part of the clip, that's what it was from. And so if you donate $50, we'll send you an exclusive clip of that. I don't want to do too much salesmanship here, but I do want to just walk you through. There's more information on the film, on why we're hosting the campaign. And we also have stretch goals. So as I mentioned, making documentaries, certainly for a film that we're hoping will go to big film festivals and maybe get a limited theatrical release in movie theaters and end up on a streaming platform or something of that nature, so millions of people can see it. It's a very expensive process. So $60,000 is our primary goal. We'll also have stretch goals of $100,000 or $150,000. If we can get to $150,000, we can complete editing for the full documentary. And if we get to 60, that will allow us to advance the film, and we will continue to seek donations and grants and funding from other sources to get us to that final goal. That's all I want to show you for this now, because I don't want to spend too much time on it. But again, you guys will have a link so you can access it and scroll through it. And we'll also provide our email to you in our follow-up email from Berkeley Historical Society, so you can follow up with us directly if you have any questions about the crowdfunding campaign in particular. So now that we're back, I'm just seeing a couple more questions come in here. I see from Janet Katz, speaking of schools, Betty Reid Soskin Middle School is an obvious place to show the film and gather interest support. Thank you. Yes, that's brilliant. And we have been in touch with the principal, Principal Jay, and we're working on that now. So we're going to do that actually. And he was very sweet. And then I asked him if he'd be interested, and he responded and copied like the entire staff of the school and said they would love to do it. So the enthusiasm there is fantastic. And we also have a number of other screenings coming up. On the 3rd of February, for instance, we're screening in person at the Richmond Museum of History, the same sample, and we'll be doing some Q&A and a similar program there. So, and we have dozens more. We're in talks with the Rosie the Riveter Trust, which is associated with the park, and with the National Park Foundation, and the San Francisco and the Oakland Public Libraries, and like literally dozens more places. So Aliana and myself and our other colleagues have been working tirelessly, truly, to get the word out during these 2 months to everybody possible about the film and about the need to get it funded so we can get it released. I see a few more questions here. Let's see. Felix Kramer says, I had the pleasure of seeing Betty at work. I'm looking forward to donating. I hope you will budget to include closed captions for the documentary. Thank you. Yes, we absolutely will include closed captions for the documentary. Some of our shorter work samples already have subtitles in them, and we only recently finished this sample, so you can hear some of the audio wasn't smoothly mixed and there's not subtitles yet, but that's what some of the money that we're raising will go to, so that everything, when we're finally ready with the film, will have subtitles, closed captions, all the audio will be seamless. And we expect to have probably 5 to 10 of Betty's songs featured in the film, and the rest will release through a soundtrack, which will include most or all of her unreleased songs that will be released into the world. Mark Solomon asks, what grants are you pursuing besides this crowdfund? Great question. We've already received actually a number of grants, which allowed us to complete filming for the project. So we've gotten very generous funding from the California Humanities Council, and we got the top prize awarded from the Berkeley Film Foundation, which they give to one project a year, of $25,000, which was amazing. And we've received funding from the Bay Area Video Coalition as well. And Gloria Steinem's Ms. Mez Foundation for Women supported the project with a grant as well. And we're seeking funds, and we'll be approaching the Ford Foundation as well as many others to continue to fund the project. And then beyond that, we're looking to partner with some production companies that have resources to help get films to the finish line. because oftentimes grants are $25,000 or $50,000, which helps a lot. But for the expense of making a large, long length film like this, it can be quicker to partner with production companies that have more resources. So we've reached out to Stephen Curry's production company, and also Queen Latifah, who's a gospel singer and a rapper and an actor from New York and a really pioneering Black artist, and half a dozen others. We've been in touch recently and are getting interest from a production company that helped to fund the documentary about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And they're interested in this film because they oftentimes make documentaries and fund documentaries about women and pioneers. So there's a whole list of other ones. And if you email us, we're happy to follow up and give you guys more information on our fundraising efforts beyond just the crowdfund. Let's see. Debbie Dilly and Vince Casalena ask, can you run through the story arc? Sure, I'd be happy to run through the story arc. So the film starts with famous Betty the Ranger, basically. That's our jumping off point, with the woman that many people know and are so inspired by, and her work as a park ranger. And from there, it explores her experiences confronting workplace segregation during World War II, and then reveals that she, beyond the uniform, as you see in the clip, there's a secret side to her life that doesn't fit within the confines of the Rosie the Riveter Park, which really looks at Betty's experiences during the World War II home front effort and then how she became a ranger. And what struck me the most, and continues to strike me the most about Betty's story, is the journey in between that led from that point as a very young woman facing segregation in the workplace to this iconic hero at 85 putting on a uniform. And the documentary clip that you just saw explores some of that her and her family started a record store, Reid's Records, in 1945, and did well, it became very successful as the first Black-owned record store in the Bay Area. And they moved to Walnut Creek because they couldn't buy property in many other parts of the Bay Area. There's a clip that we'll include in the film, an old newsreel I found, and there's a reporter standing on Shattuck Avenue, and he says, I'm here on Shattuck Avenue, and this is the dividing line. And African Americans, he uses the word Negro, but African Americans can't buy property above Shattuck. It's segregated based on, he doesn't explain this, but the reasons are based on restrictive covenants from within city ordinances and redlining and practices from real estate associations. So Betty and her husband was a professional athlete, and one of the other baseball players on the baseball team, a Negro baseball team that he played for, was married to a white woman, and she purchased property in Walnut Creek and then turned it over to the family. Otherwise, they couldn't have purchased it. And they started building and received threats from neighbors saying they would burn down the building that they were doing of the home because they didn't want undesirables there in the area, and received threats of violence. But they pushed forward because they were determined to live there because it was one of their dreams. And they did move in, and their children, as you saw in the clip, were exposed to threats and violence and all kinds of other problematic experiences. And Betty had a nervous breakdown and started writing her songs. She thought she was remembering songs, but in fact she was composing and creating these songs. And so the film follows that journey, and then it explores in a parallel arc her experiences now, deciding, first confronting that she left this life as a singer-songwriter behind and buried it, and then listening to the songs for the first time in decades, which you saw in the clip, and she decides that she wants to give that life again. And so she works with younger musicians to re-explore the music that she left behind so long ago. And eventually she confronts her own fears about maybe her age and her inability to be able to compete with her younger self, and sings again beautifully. And the film explores that, and the backstory that I was explaining earlier, a lot of that is explored, in fact, through her experiences with the younger musicians that she partners with. So rather than just using interview and archival content, we were able to film slices of Betty's life along this journey to re-explore her music. And we used the conversations and interactions she had and emotional moments she shared, which is just alluded to at the end of the work sample that you saw, to explore some of the more expository information about her backstory and about her experiences as a younger woman when she was writing and creating this music. And so it's really sort of a dance between a modern journey that Betty went on in her 90s and the past experiences that informed the journey that she's going on in the present tense. So that's mostly the arc of the film. Some of it is still to be determined and to be explored, but those are the general overarching narrative arcs that the film will be built upon. And I should say that there's certain experiences, like Betty first started remembering her songs when she was working with a psychiatrist in Walnut Creek dealing with depression, and she was suicidal, as she mentions, and there's nothing to show those experiences. We hear her talking about them in the clip, but as a director and as a cinematographer, I really believe film is at its strongest when you can show things unfolding on camera instead of just hearing about people talk about a past experience. That's powerful, but if you see it happening, it's more powerful. And so that's an example of one of the recreations that we want to do, where we'll cast actors and recreate these experiences, that and other pivotal experiences and moments in Betty's life that were never documented. We're not going to have dialogue. We're not going to move into like what feels like a melodrama. We'll hear Betty's real voice telling us about these experiences, but we'll see them unfolding in a way where it almost is like we're creating archival material that never existed. As if there were a film team that were there at the time, we may actually shoot some of this material on 16mm film so that it feels of the time, and we'll be transparent and let people know before the film starts in a text card what we're doing. I don't want to deceive people, but I do think taking the audience into those moments rather than just hearing about them as stories looking backwards will make the film all the more powerful. So that's a little bit about the arc and the overarching story of the film. I would like to move on to a couple other questions. We have another screening online. We will have other screenings online. And if you sign up for our email list by visiting signmynametofreedom.com, then we will announce as screenings come up, we'll announce future screenings there. We expect that we may have half a dozen more screenings that are online or more. And so if you all think that this is something that other people would be inspired by, we'd encourage you to share the word on these future screenings coming up, because we really want to get information on this film out to as many people as possible. Let's see, here's another question from Janet Katz. Any interviews with people like the Color of Law author? Yes, Richard Rothstein is the author of a book called The Color of Law, which is an incredible book about the history of residential segregation in the United States and how that influences and impacts the divisions we see in cities today. And he happens to be a professor at the University of California, Berkeley. So we interviewed him for the film, and that material will likely be included in the full film. But we wanted to keep this initial work sample focused on Betty's story as much as possible, because that's what tends to resonate emotionally with people more than anything else. But when we expand the film to 90 minutes, we'll expand all of the different themes that are explored in the work sample as well as others. And part of that will be likely hearing from experts like Richard Rothstein, because it's a part of US history that's largely left out of our national narrative, and it informs the situation that we see today in cities tremendously. Suggesting reaching out to the podcast East Bay yesterday to pitch the film. Absolutely. Betty did an interview with the podcast East Bay yesterday, and we are in the process of reaching out to them now to get coverage about the film and about the crowdfunding campaign. There's also a recommendation for some mental health organizations that we can reach out to, which is a wonderful idea. Thank you, Mark Solomons, for that. We will note that down and we'll reach out to them. And if anybody has other recommendations for partner organizations or individuals that you'd suggest that we connect with, please go ahead and email us. Aliana has been posting in the chat some links for you all to go to. There's signmynametofreedom.com, and she gave a link to our email list as well. And also we'll follow up with all of you by email with these links so you can access them. We'll do that through Berkeley Historical Society. Let's see, it's 8 o'clock. So I just want to see, Anne, if you are still on and are able to unmute yourself, are there any questions or discussion that you would like to lead and direct from a Berkeley Historical Society perspective? And if people continue to send in questions by chat, we'll address them as they come in.
No, nothing comes to mind except that I had a question that not related to Berkeley Historical Society, but to the fact that I'm Unitarian Universalist, which was that I believe Betty was, I believe she said, I wrote that song for my church,
Yeah.
And she would have been referring to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Walnut Creek.
Yeah, Betty was one of the founding members, or the very earliest members of a Unitarian Universalist church in called the Mount Diablo Unitarian Universalist Church in Walnut Creek. And that was a refuge that she found during one of the darkest times of her life, right? Because the initial wave of reception that she got moving in was from the bigots and the racists that didn't want her there. But then over time, she was able to connect with folks that had a very different perspective. And even though Betty and her family were the first African Americans in the area, there were folks that are either white or of other races that believed that the area should be open to people regardless of race. And so Betty became a very important early member of that church and has been active with it off and on through most of her life. And we're organizing a screening with that church probably in February. We're still trying to settle on a date with them where we'll be screening the same sample you just saw at the church. And it's a great example of Betty crossing many, many different divisions during her life, right? And finding ways to build constructive relationships in some of the hardest, most challenging environments. And then through a result of building constructive relationships, helping to change those environments. So Betty, a lot of her early singer-songwriter work was associated with that church, and her introduction to activism in large part was through that church. And it's something that transformed her life, and she helped to transform the area as a result. And one of the recreations, another recreation we'd like to do for the film is based around a meeting that Betty went to. And this is kind of how she got connected with the church. So I'll share the story briefly. A few years after Betty and her family moved into Walnut Creek, another Black family moved or wanted to move into the Mount Diablo Valley. And I don't believe it was Walnut Creek, it was one of the surrounding communities. And the Homeowners Association decided to meet as a result, because it was a crisis at the time, right? This was something that they thought would drive down their property values, and much worse than that, there were people that were saying far worse things. And so Betty got wind of this, and she went to that Homeowners Association meeting quietly, gracefully walked in and sat in the back and heard horrible, bigoted, racist narratives from people there saying that these people would bring diseases and that they would destroy the community, and that people had to band together to keep them out. And mortified, Betty listened, I don't know for how long, let's say 10 minutes, and then got the courage finally to stand up and say that she was one of the undesirables they were referring to, and that she was there, and that she needs to have her truth be heard. And she told them that she thought what they were doing was wrong. And people started, one person in particular started heckling and yelling at her, and she became terrified and ran off. She was afraid for her safety, and probably with good reason, honestly. And she ran off and left the meeting and was running to her car, and she heard footsteps behind her and was afraid that she was going to be attacked. And she felt a hand on her shoulder and turned around. And it was a man named David Borton, who was one of the founding members of the Unitarian Church in Mount Diablo. And he told her that he was with her and that there were people that supported her, and asked her if she would like to meet other members of the church and other activists in the area. And she decided to do so. And that changed her life. That connected her with a group of people that welcomed her and helped develop her voice as an activist. And that moment, Betty tells beautifully in our interviews with her. But it's something like that I was mentioning before about her work with her psychiatrist. There's nothing that documents that. There's no photos. There's no existing archival newspaper clippings or anything about that. There probably was at the time, but it's all been lost over time. Sadly, many of that stuff was never documented and kept. And so that's a pivotal moment in Betty's life, a very emotional moment, the way that she tells the story, and one that we plan to recreate, again, using actors. And I think that, again, it's not like we're going to hear dialogue from the actors. We'd hear Betty telling the story, but we would see an interpretation of what she experienced. And it's something that we think is really important that will add to the impact of the film. And oftentimes little differences in details like that and how a film is made can make the difference between a film being received at like medium level film festivals versus getting a release in movie theaters. And we believe that Betty's story is so powerful. And we know that if we're able to raise the funds we need, we can create a film that will resonate with people, almost like narrative films that you see when you go out to the movies. And so that's our goal, is to have this film be seen by folks in movie theaters. And that's one of the steps that we're working on to do that. But I want to bring Aliana in now as well to comment and to respond to any of these messages. And I'd also like you, Aliana, if you want to just speak at all about sort of your experiences reconnecting with Betty through this film and how that's impacted you.
Alrighty. I will start off with answering your question. This film for me has been an amazing reintroduction to my grandmother. I'm sure, as many people, we have a very particular relationship with our grandparents as we do with our family members. And honestly, up until about last year, Betty Reid Soskin had always been my grandmother. And a big part about this film is exploring her journey into finding herself as a woman, as an individual, and to learn that about my grandmother is incredibly special. One of my first tasks that I had to do as a post-production assistant was reviewing all of the footage. So it was really just a treat for me, honestly. I believe, if somebody wasn't reviewing footage about their grandmother, it might be tedious work, but I really delved into it and reviewed it with my grandmother as well. And we had these amazing, important discussions about her and her life that I'm so grateful to have been able to do. And extremely lucky because she's 101 at the time of us reviewing these things, and I feel extremely fortunate to have that. That's my main position emotionally in terms of my ties to this film. So it's been absolutely incredible, and it definitely gives me an emotional edge to really get this film to the finish line. But I have also been receiving quite a few comments, and I would love to say thank you to everybody's well wishes to my grandmother and all of the kind words about our sample. I do have a question from Sydney Gerwitz Clemens, and she's asking, can I have the 20-minute bit to show at a house party? And I'm going to let you answer that, Brian.
I think that's something that we would love to do. We just have to work out a few logistics about it, because if we release too much of the film publicly now, then festivals like Sundance and some of the distributors don't consider us to have a premiere, which is essential to them for I guess showing the film. So I would say the answer is yes, but please send an email directly to me and let's set up a phone call so that we can chat about it and just figure out the logistics. But we would love that. That would be amazing. And thank you for the offer, because that's exactly the kind of support that we're looking for to help get information out about the film. And I believe Aliana sent a link earlier where you guys can email us, and you can also find an email through our website, signmyname2freedom.com, and we'll include an email address in the follow-up email that Anne sends out from Berkeley Historical Society after the screening. Thank you. We really appreciate that. That's very gracious of you, and we're excited to partner with you.
And since we have time for it, Mark Solomons had asked if we were going to mention the upcoming musical about Betty. And while we're not directly affiliated with them, the musical is something, they're basically a sister project. The beginnings of the musical actually started with the shoot of this documentary. And we're not sure exactly where that gets placed in the actual final cut, but we have amazing footage of the concept artist, Jamie Z. They met Betty at a performance with the CMC. Please let me know what that is abbreviation for, because it's escaping me right now.
Community Music Center in San Francisco, which is a youth music education center nonprofit.
Yes, thank you, Brian. They were performing along with CMC, and they were doing a rendition of one of Betty's songs, composed by Marcus Shelby. And they sung Little Boy Black and Brown Skin Heart and Sign My Name to Freedom, and really connected with Betty's music, and it resulted in the Betty's discography, or part of it, turning into a musical about her life. And we're really excited to be partnering with them. Hopefully we're going to have another screening much like this one, where we get to talk to the creative team of the play, hopefully some cast, where we really get to talk about our respective projects and the relationship with Betty, and the way that her story has continues to inspire even more art, which I think is such an important part of this film, is Betty getting that validation that she is in fact an artist. So I had to get that plug in there. Other than that, I'm scanning through if anyone has any more questions.
Can you hear me? I did see, I was Googling Googling Eventbrite, Sign My Name to Freedom, and the musical popped up. I hadn't heard about it before, but it says world premiere musical, March 29th to April 13th, 2024 in San Francisco. It's the San Francisco Bay Area Theater Company. And they're calling it Sign My Name to Freedom, the unheard songs of Betty Reid Soskin. And I assume this is the same one you're talking about. It has
Yes.
people playing, where'd it go? The four Bettys: Little Betty, Married Betty, Revolutionary Betty, and Ranger Betty. So should we send out a link where people can learn more about that too? Anyway.
Sure, if you already have it up, that would be great if you can add it to the chat. Otherwise, I can also.
My other computer, but anyway, you can find it on Eventbrite using that same name, Sign My Name to Freedom.
Yes, there's been quite a bit confusion about the two projects because of the same names, and we aren't like working together per se, but in promotion we definitely support one another, and we're very excited about their work. Sign My Name to Freedom, the play, is also working very closely with my family in terms of its production and its rollout.
I wonder if it's too late to change the name of the film. Have you thought about that, Brian?
It's a possibility. I mean, the film is still a work in progress, so the name is not set in stone. And so far, it's what we've been working with, but there's definitely a possibility because Betty also has a memoir by the same name. Right. But we'll see. That'll evolve, I think, as the film continues to take shape.
Okay. Any folks with other questions? Or Aliana, I think you maybe had some more. No?
I don't believe so. I got a bunch of sweet messages, mostly, but I think most of the questions were directed to Brian.
Okay, well, I hope Betty has been feeling the love, and I thank you all for coming tonight, and we look forward to helping to spread the word about this. And yes, you'll be hearing from Berkeley Historical Society with some of the details and links in the near future. I guess we might as well conclude.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks, everyone.
May I?
Yes, Betty, please, you get the last word, of course.
May I please thank everyone for being interested.
Thank you, Betty. We love you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.